The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called at dawn, station time. Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth sat in the gleaming circular chamber, watching as holographic displays showed the approaching threat that had sent shockwaves through the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, suspended in the heart of Nexus Station, where artificial gravity generators created a perfect sphere of breathable atmosphere surrounded by the infinite void of space. Around her, representatives of dozens of species shifted nervously in their specialized seating arrangements. The Altarians, tall and crystalline, hummed in harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. Their ambassador, Resonance of Truth, cast prismatic light patterns across the chamber walls as emotions played through their translucent form. The Vexstar delegation sat rigid in their powered armor, red optical sensors scanning constantly for threats that existed more in their paranoid military minds than in reality. Their war leader, Thakmor, drummed metallic fingers against his weapon harness with barely contained aggression. The ethereal collective's representatives seemed to barely exist in the physical realm, a shimmering outline of pure consciousness that spoke directly into the minds of those present. Ancient beyond measure, they had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy, and their mental voice carried the weight of eons when they communicated. The Wanderer clans had sent their Namarch, Stella Voidwalker, whose environmental suit constantly recycled the atmosphere of a dozen different worlds, allowing her people to exist in any environment. At the center of the chamber, a massive holographic projection showed the approaching fleet. The ships were unlike anything in the current galactic database, their whole design suggesting technology that predated most known civilizations. They moved in perfect formation, their wake leaving distortions in spacetime itself that spoke of power beyond current understanding. The energy signatures they emanated made even the most sophisticated sensors struggle to maintain a clear reading. The Devourers have returned, announced High Counselor Zeth Kree, the ancient ethereal whose mental voice reached every mind in the chamber simultaneously. The words carried with them images, memories of ancient wars, of worlds stripped bare and left as lifeless husks drifting in space. After 3,000 years of absence, they have followed the trail of their escaped prey. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as more images flooded her consciousness. Worlds that had once teemed with life, now reduced to empty shells. Entire star systems drained of energy, their suns dimmed to barely glowing embers. Civilizations that had stood for millennia, wiped from existence as if they had never been. The Devourers were more than conquerors, they were a force of cosmic entropy that left only emptiness in their wake. The hologram shifted to show a single ship, massive beyond belief, its hull scarred by centuries of travel through the void. This was the Kythera generation ship, the last remnant of a species that had fled the Devourers' initial expansion 300 years ago. The ship showed signs of severe damage and failing systems. Hull breaches had been patched with whatever materials were available, giving it a patchwork appearance that spoke of desperate survival rather than engineering elegance. The Kythera have served the galaxy faithfully, continued Zeth Kree, though Sarah could sense reluctance in the mental projection. Their neural bridging capabilities have prevented countless wars, their translation matrices have allowed species with incompatible biology to communicate and trade. They have been our companions, our mediators, our bridge to understanding. Resonance of Truth shifted, light patterns indicating deep distress. The Altarian's harmonic voice filled the chamber with crystalline tones. But they have brought the Devourers to our doorstep. Their presence endangers every world, every species, every life in this galaxy. The data is clear, the Devourer fleet follows their trail directly. They will not stop until the Kythera are found. War leader Thakmor's mechanical voice cut through the discussion like a blade. The Vexstar Empire has already withdrawn protection from the Kythera vessel. Our battle fleets cannot risk engagement with a force that destroyed civilizations when our ancestors were still learning to control fire. Military analysis indicates less than 3% chance of survival in direct confrontation. Sarah found herself studying the projection of the Kythera ship more closely. It housed nearly 1 million souls, the last of their kind. The Kythera themselves were a fascinating species, bipedal like humans, but with neural clusters along their spines that allowed them to interface directly with alien thought patterns. They had never been warriors or conquerors. Instead, they had become the galaxy's most trusted intermediaries, capable of understanding and translating not just language but the fundamental concepts behind how different species thought and perceived reality. The chamber fell silent as Stella Voidwalker activated her communication array. Her voice, filtered through her environmental suit, carried the weight of the nomadic peoples who had roamed the galaxy for generations. The Wanderer clans have already altered course. Our migration routes will avoid this sector entirely. We cannot risk our children for the sake of one doomed species, no matter how much they have helped us in the past. One by one, other species announced their withdrawal of support. The silicon-based crystalline hegemony retracted their offer of safe harbor. The aquatic depths dwellers closed their underwater cities to refugee ships. The hive-minded swarm confederacy simply stated that the mathematical probability of survival made protection impossible. Sarah watched in growing horror as the greatest abandonment in galactic history unfolded before her eyes. These were civilizations that had fought beside each other, traded with each other, built the foundations of galactic society together. Yet when faced with a threat that endangered them all, they were willing to sacrifice their longtime allies without hesitation. High Counselor Zethkree's mental voice carried a tone of finality. The motion to withdraw all protection and support from the Kythera vessel has been approved by unanimous vote of all participating civilizations. The ancient being's attention turned to Sarah, and she felt the weight of eons pressing against her consciousness. Earth's representative has not yet cast their vote. Ambassador Chen, what is humanity's decision? The chamber fell silent. Every optical sensor, every sensory organ, every form of perception available to the assembled species focused on the young human woman who had only recently been granted the right to speak in this ancient forum. Earth was the newcomer here, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. They were barely above the status of a client species, granted council representation more as a courtesy than from any real respect for their power or wisdom. Sarah felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a physical force. She thought of Earth, of humanity's short but turbulent history among the stars. They had made mistakes, certainly. Their first contact protocols had been clumsy, their understanding of galactic politics naive. But they had also shown something that apparently set them apart from other species: and stubborn refusal to abandon others in need, even when logic demanded it. She remembered the evacuation of Mars Colony 7 when solar flares had threatened to sterilize the entire settlement. Every expert had said the rescue was impossible, that the risk was too great. But Captain Martinez had taken his ship into the solar storm anyway, saving 8,000 colonists at the cost of his own life. She thought of the relief missions to Proxima Station when the asteroid impact had left them without life support. 3 different human ships had responded, despite regulations that such missions should wait for proper authorization. Earth requests additional time to consider our response, Sarah said finally, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the decision she faced. Resonance of Trutha's light patterns shifted to show irritation. The Devourer fleet will arrive within 72 standard hours. There is no time for extended deliberation. The decision must be made now. Humanity understands the timeline, Sarah replied, standing slowly from her seat. But this decision will define not just our response to this crisis, but our place in galactic society for generations to come. We will provide our answer within the required timeframe. As she prepared to leave the chamber, Sarah's personal communicator activated with an urgent message from Earth Fleet Command. The words on the screen made her blood run cold, but also filled her with a strange sense of pride. 3 human ships had already broken from their assigned patrol routes and were moving toward the Kythera vessel. Captain Jennifer Walsh of the UES Defiance had transmitted a simple message: we don't leave people behind. En route to provide assistance. War Leader Thakmore's optical sensors focused on Sarah as she read the message. Your species shows admirable courage, but courage without wisdom is merely another word for extinction. The Vexstar Empire has seen countless brave species reduced to nothing more than dust and memory. Perhaps, Sarah replied, meeting the mechanical being's gaze without flinching. But some things are worth the risk. As she left the chamber, Sarah could feel the weight of every species' attention following her. They had made their choice based on logic, on survival, on the cold mathematics of galactic politics. Now they waited to see if humanity would prove themselves wise enough to follow the same path, or foolish enough to stand alone against impossible odds. The corridor outside the council chamber was empty except for the ambient lighting that followed her movement. Sarah's footsteps echoed off the polished walls as she made her way to the human embassy section of the station. She had 36 hours to decide not just the fate of the Kythera, but humanity's entire future in galactic society. If they chose to help, they would be standing against the judgment of every major civilization in the galaxy. If they chose to abandon the Kythera, they would be betraying everything that had made humanity unique since they first looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. The decision would define who humanity truly was when tested by the cold realities of cosmic politics. And, in 36 hours, the galaxy would learn whether the newest species to join their ranks would follow the wisdom of ages, or forge a new path entirely. The human embassy aboard Nexus Station buzzed with activity that would have seemed chaotic to most galactic species, but which Sarah Chen recognized as organized urgency. Technicians worked frantically at holographic displays showing fleet positions and tactical readouts. Communication officers maintained constant contact with Earth, the outer colonies, and the 3 ships that had already departed to intercept the Kythera vessel. In the center of it all, Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood like a pillar of calm authority, his weathered face betraying none of the stress that Sarah knew must be consuming him. "Report," Sarah said as she entered the main operations center, her diplomatic robe still bearing the formal weight of the council session she had just left. Lieutenant Commander Zhang looked up from her tactical display, her young face grave with the implications of what she was about to relay. "The Defiance, Courageous, and New Horizons are maintaining course toward the Kythera ship. Captain Walsh estimates intercept in 18 hours. However, Admiral, the Devourer fleet has accelerated. Our xenotechnology specialists believe they've detected the human ship's approach and are moving to cut them off." Admiral Rodriguez moved to the central holographic display, where the vast three-dimensional map of local space showed the deadly dance of ships converging on a single point. The Kythera vessel appeared as a green, limping along on a trajectory that would take them nowhere in particular. They had simply been fleeing for so long that forward momentum had become their only purpose. The 3 human ships showed as blue triangles, small but moving with purpose toward the refugees. And, behind them all, like a storm front of red markers, came the Devourer fleet. "Analysis of the alien ships?" Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had commanded fleets through the Proxima Rebellion and the Titan mining conflicts. Dr. Elizabeth Vasquez, the embassy's chief xenotechnologist, stepped forward with a tablet displaying data that made Sarah's stomach clench. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases, Admiral. The Altarians shared some historical data before they withdrew from the council session. These ships are using technology based on principles we don't even have theoretical frameworks for. They don't just destroy civilizations, they absorb their technological and biological distinctiveness, becoming stronger with each conquest." Sarah studied the projection, watching the slow-motion catastrophe unfolding in the void. "What about the Kythera? What's their current status?" Communications Officer Harrison, a veteran of first contact protocols, activated his display. "We've established direct communication with their ship, Ambassador. Their leader, someone called Melodic Understanding of Distant Stars, has been trying to contact the Council for the past 6 hours. She's asking if anyone is coming to help them." The weight of that simple statement settled over the room like a physical force. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of the decision before them. 1,000,000 lives hung in the balance, and apparently only humanity was even considering lifting a finger to help. "What did you tell them?" Sarah asked. Harrison's voice was quiet when he replied. "I told them that Earth was still considering its options." I didn't know what else to say. Admiral Rodriguez turned from the tactical display to face Sarah directly. "Ambassador, I need to know what kind of authority you have here. 3 of our ships are already committed, but if we're going to make a real difference, I need to deploy the entire 5th Fleet. That's 47 ships, including 2 dreadnoughts and the carrier Indomitable. Once I give that order, there's no taking it back." Sarah felt the weight of species survival pressing down on her shoulders. In the span of a few hours, she had gone from being a diplomatic representative at a council meeting to potentially making the most important decision in human history. She thought of Earth, of the colonies, of the millions of humans who had trusted their government to make wise decisions about their place in the galaxy. "What are our chances if we fight?" she asked. Dr. Vasquez consulted her tablet again, running calculations that seemed to take forever. "Based on what we know about Devourer technology from historical records, honestly, Ambassador, our chances in direct combat are virtually zero. Their ships are larger, more advanced, and powered by technology we can barely comprehend." "But..." She paused, her expression thoughtful. "But there might be another way." "Explain." "The Kythera neural bridging abilities aren't just for translation and meditation. According to the data they've shared with us, they can actually interface with alien technology at a fundamental level. If we could get close enough, if we could somehow combine human tactical thinking with Kythera neural bridging." Admiral Rodriguez leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we try to hack their ships?" I'm suggesting we try something that no species in galactic history has ever attempted, a true merger of technological capabilities between two entirely different forms of intelligence. Human intuition and adaptability combined with Kythera neural plasticity. It might be crazy enough to work. The Admiral's expression showed both skepticism and hope. That would require getting close enough to their fleet to attempt interface, and protecting the Kythera ship long enough for them to make the attempt. We'd be outnumbered at least 50 to 1. Sarah's communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. She opened it to find a brief video message from President Harrison himself, transmitted from the Oval Office. His face was haggard with the weight of command, but his voice was steady. Ambassador Chen, the situation has been explained to me by Fleet Command. I want you to know that whatever decision you make, you have the full backing of Earth's government. We've reviewed the intelligence reports, we understand the risks, and we also understand what's at stake. The choice is yours, but know that humanity stands behind you whatever you decide. She closed the message and looked around the room at the faces of her fellow humans. These people had left Earth, left everything familiar and safe, to serve at the frontier of human space. They had dedicated their lives to building bridges between humanity and the wider galaxy. And now they waited to see if those bridges would hold under the weight of the most important test they had ever faced. Open a channel to Captain Walsh, Sarah said finally. The main screen activated to show the bridge of the UES Defiance, where Captain Jennifer Walsh stood surrounded by her crew. Walsh was a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts, known for her aggressive tactics and absolute refusal to accept defeat. Behind her, Sarah could see the organized chaos of a ship preparing for combat. Captain, what's your assessment of the situation? Walsh's voice carried the confidence of a combat veteran, but also the honesty of someone who understood exactly how bad their odds were. Ambassador, we're looking at a fight we probably can't win through conventional means. But the Kythera ship is dying anyway. Life support is failing, their engines are breaking down, and they're down to emergency power. If we don't act, they'll be dead in a matter of days whether the Devourers reach them or not. Can you protect them long enough to attempt Dr. Vasquez's plan? If the Fifth Fleet joins us, we might be able to buy enough time. But I need you to understand, Ambassador, this isn't a rescue mission anymore. This is a war against an enemy that has conquered civilizations we can't even imagine. If we do this, we're not just risking our ships. We're risking the safety of every human world. Sarah looked around the room one more time, meeting the eyes of each person present. She saw fear there, certainly, but also determination and, something else, a stubborn human refusal to accept the unacceptable. These people had joined the diplomatic corps not because it was safe, but because they believed in something larger than themselves. Open a channel to the Fifth Fleet, she commanded. Admiral Rodriguez stepped forward. Ambassador, are you certain? Once we commit our forces, the galaxy will know that humanity chose to stand against the Council's judgment. There will be consequences. There are always consequences, Admiral. The question is whether we can live with them. Sarah squared her shoulders and faced the communication array. This is Ambassador Chen to all Fifth Fleet commanders. You are hereby ordered to proceed at maximum speed to coordinates Tango 779. Your mission is to protect the Kythera generation ship and facilitate a joint technological operation with Kythera neural specialists. This operation has been authorized at the highest levels of Earth government. She paused, knowing that her next words would be recorded, transmitted, and probably studied by historians for centuries to come. Ladies and gentlemen, today we show the galaxy what it means to be human. We don't abandon our friends. We don't accept the unacceptable. And we don't give up, even when logic tells us we should. Humanity stands with the Kythera. The communication array crackled with responses as 47 ships across the local sector acknowledged their orders and began changing course toward what would likely be the most important battle in human history. Sarah watched the tactical display update as blue markers began converging toward the slowly dying green dot that represented 1 million refugees who had been abandoned by everyone else in the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez stepped up beside her. Ambassador, there's something else you should know about the Kythera. Their neural bridging abilities, they're not just technological. They're empathic. When they work with other species, they actually share emotions, memories, experiences. If this plan works, if we can establish a neural link between human crews and Kythera specialists. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying that we might be about to create something entirely new, a truly merged consciousness between two species. The implications could reshape our understanding of what it means to be sentient. Sarah nodded slowly. In trying to save the Kythera, humanity might be taking the first step towards something unprecedented in galactic history. Or they might be about to join them in extinction. Either way, they would face the future together, as partners rather than as abandoned refugees drifting in the cold void of space. The next 18 hours would determine not just the fate of two species, but, potentially, the future of consciousness itself in the galaxy. Captain Jennifer Walsh stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the tactical display as the human fleet formed a protective formation around the massive Kythera generation ship. What she saw there defied every principle of military engineering she had ever learned. The alien vessel was enormous, nearly 30 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide, but it moved through space like a wounded animal, listing to one side as failing gravity generators created uneven internal conditions. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Morrison from the sensor station. How are they even still alive in that thing? The answer came through the communication array as melodic understanding of distant stars, the Kythera leader, established contact with the human fleet. Her voice, translated through their universal communication protocols, carried harmonics that suggested both gratitude and desperate hope. Human vessels, we cannot adequately express our appreciation for your presence. We had begun to believe that we would face the end alone. Walsh moved to the communication station, studying the visual feed from the Kythera ship. Melodic understanding appeared on screen as a tall, graceful being with elongated limbs and neural clusters that glowed softly along her spine. Her large, dark eyes held depths of intelligence and sadness that spoke of centuries spent in flight from an implacable enemy. Melodic understanding, this is Captain Walsh of the human vessel Defiance. We need to discuss the tactical situation immediately. Our scientists believe there might be a way to stop the Devourers, but it requires close cooperation between our species. The Kythera leader tilted her head in a gesture that somehow conveyed both curiosity and concern. You speak of stopping the Devourers. No species has ever accomplished such a feat. They are not merely conquerors, they are entropy given form, the end of all biological and technological development. Dr. Vasquez joined Walsh at the communication station, her tablet displaying the theoretical framework they had developed during the journey to intercept the Kythera ship. Melodic understanding, we believe that your neural bridging capabilities, combined with human tactical adaptability, might allow us to interface with Devourer technology in ways they won't expect. But, we need volunteers willing to establish neural links with human crew members. The pause that followed was filled with what Walsh recognized as rapid communication between Kythera individuals. Their neural clusters pulsed in synchronized patterns, creating a visual display of collective decision-making that was both beautiful and alien. Captain Walsh, melodic understanding said finally, what you propose has never been attempted between our species and any other. The neural bridging process involves sharing not just thoughts, but memories, emotions, fundamental ways of perceiving reality. Your people would experience existence as Kythera do, and we would experience existence as humans do. The psychological implications are significant. We understand the risks, Walsh replied, though privately she wondered if any human truly could understand what they were volunteering for. But, the alternative is extinction for your people and eventual extinction for ours. The Devourers won't stop with you. Before melodic understanding could respond, alarms began blaring across the Defiance's bridge. Sensor operator Morrison's voice cracked with tension. Captain, we've got massive energy signatures entering the system. The Devourer fleet is arriving ahead of schedule. The main tactical display shifted to show the emergence of the alien fleet, and Walsh felt her blood turn cold. The ships that materialized from hyperspace were unlike anything in human experience. They were enormous, each one the size of a small moon, with hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their surfaces writhed with what appeared to be organic components, as if the ships themselves were living entities rather than mere machines. Energy readings are off the charts, Dr. Vasquez reported, her voice tight with scientific fascination and human terror. These aren't just ships, they're displaying energy outputs comparable to small stars. How is that even possible? The answer came in the form of a communication transmission from the lead Devourer vessel. The signal bypassed all human encryption and communication protocols, speaking directly to the bridge crew in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was not mechanical, but it was not truly organic either, something that existed in the spaces between life and death, order and chaos. small flesh that builds in metal. You interfere with the completion of an ancient hunt. The singers of connection must return to the source. Your presence is noted, catalogued, and dismissed. Walsh found her voice, though every instinct screamed at her to maintain communication silence. This is Captain Jennifer Walsh of the United Earth Starship Defiance. The beings you call singers of connection are under human protection. If you wish to harm them, you'll have to go through us. The response came as laughter that made the ship's hull vibrate in sympathy. Small flesh that builds in metal believes it can resist the completion. Amusing. We shall preserve samples of your essence for study before returning you to the source along with the singers of connection. The lead devourer ship began to move, and Walsh realized with growing horror that it was not using any recognizable form of propulsion. Space itself seemed to bend around the vessel, allowing it to cover impossible distances in seconds rather than minutes. Its companions spread out in a formation that suggested they were not just planning an attack, but a harvest. All ships, assume defensive formation Delta 7, Walsh commanded, knowing even as she said it that their weapons and armor were pitifully inadequate against what they faced. Prepare for engagement with hostile forces. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, forming a sphere around the Kythera generation ship. 47 vessels against a dozen alien craft that individually outmassed entire human battle groups. The mathematics were not encouraging. On the communication channel, Melodic Understanding's voice carried new urgency. Captain Walsh, if we are to attempt the neural bridging, it must be now. Once the devourers begin their feeding process, they will emit psychic disruption fields that make deep neural connection impossible. Walsh looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were veterans of deep space conflicts, men and women who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments the human fleet could offer. But what she was about to ask of them went beyond military duty into something approaching religious faith. Dr. Vasquez, how many volunteers do we need for the neural bridging process? The scientist consulted her tablet, running calculations that seemed to take forever while the devourer ships drew closer. For a meaningful interface attempt, we'd need at least 12 human Kythera pairs. But, Captain, the volunteers need to be individuals with high neural plasticity, people capable of adapting to completely alien thought patterns without losing their fundamental identity. I volunteer, said Lieutenant Morrison from the sensor station. Count me in, added Chief Engineer Rodriguez, stepping forward from his position near the engine status displays. One by one, members of the bridge crew volunteered for an experimental procedure that might kill them, drive them insane, or transform them into something no longer recognizably human. Walsh felt a surge of pride in her species that was almost overwhelming. When faced with the impossible, humans did not calculate odds or seek safe alternatives. They stepped forward and did what needed to be done. Melodic Understanding, we have volunteers ready for neural bridging. What do we need to do? The Kythera leader's reply came with undertones of both admiration and sadness. Captain Walsh, your species' willingness to risk individual identity for collective survival is unprecedented in our experience with galactic civilizations. Very well. We are transmitting coordinates for docking ports on our vessel. Your volunteers must come aboard immediately. Walsh activated the ship's internal communication system. This is the captain. We are about to attempt something that has never been tried in galactic history. Volunteers for neural bridging with Kythera specialists are to report to Shuttle Bay 2 immediately. This is a volunteer-only mission, and anyone who participates should understand that they may not return as the same person who left. As her crew began moving toward the shuttle bays, Walsh found herself studying the approaching devourer fleet. The alien ships had stopped their advance, perhaps surprised by the humans' willingness to board the Kythera vessel rather than flee. Their hulls pulsed with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than human senses were capable of processing. Captain, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, there's something else about the neural bridging process that Melodic Understanding didn't mention. According to the data we've received, the connection isn't temporary. Once established, human and Kythera consciousness will be permanently linked. We're not just risking our volunteers' lives, we're potentially creating a new form of hybrid consciousness. Walsh nodded grimly. They deserve to know. Open a channel to the shuttle bay. Attention volunteers, she announced, the neural bridging process will create permanent links between human and Kythera consciousness. You will not return from this mission as purely human beings. If anyone wishes to withdraw, now is the time. The response came as silence from the shuttle bay, followed by Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice over the communication system. "Captain, we understand. We're going anyway." As the shuttles launched toward the Kythera generation ship, Walsh watched the tactical display showing the Devourer fleet maintaining position. They seemed content to wait, perhaps curious about what the humans thought they could accomplish with such a desperate gambit. What they were about to discover was that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat was the only logical outcome. And, when that human stubbornness combined with Kythera neural capabilities, it might just create something the ancient Devourers had never encountered in 3,000 years of consuming civilizations. The next hour would determine whether the galaxy's newest species would prove to be just another meal for cosmic predators, or something entirely unprecedented in galactic history. Lieutenant Morrison felt his consciousness expanding in ways that human language had no words to describe. The neural bridging chamber aboard the Kythera generation ship was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a sphere of crystalline formations that hummed with bioelectric energy, where thoughts became visible as patterns of light dancing through the air. His Kythera partner, Harmony of Distant Echoes, knelt across from him in the center of the chamber, her neural clusters glowing with increasing intensity as their minds began to merge. Morrison could feel her memories flowing into his consciousness, centuries of flight through the void, the terror of watching worlds consumed by the Devourers, the desperate hope that had sustained her people through 300 years of exile. But, what shocked him most was what Harmony of Distant Echoes was experiencing from his mind, the fierce, stubborn determination that he recognized as fundamentally human. She was seeing through human eyes for the first time, experiencing the raw emotional intensity that drove humanity to fight impossible battles and refuse to accept defeat. "Your species burns with such intensity," Harmony of Distant Echoes whispered, though her words came as much through their shared neural link as through spoken language. "You feel everything so deeply, so completely. How do you function with such emotional extremes?" Morrison found himself laughing, the sound echoing strangely in the crystalline chamber. "We don't function despite the intensity. We function because of it. It's what makes us human." Around them, 11 other pairs were undergoing the same process. Chief Engineer Rodriguez was linked with a Kythera technician called Understanding of Mechanical Harmonies, their combined consciousness already beginning to comprehend Devourer technology in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. Dr. Vasquez had paired with Wisdom of Ancient Patterns, and Morrison could sense through the expanding neural network that they were making breakthrough discoveries about the fundamental principles underlying Devourer ship construction. The bridging process was not just combining their thoughts, it was creating something entirely new. Human intuition and adaptability merged with Kythera neural plasticity to produce insights that transcended what either species could achieve independently. Morrison found himself understanding concepts that had no human equivalent while simultaneously sharing human tactical thinking that amazed his Kythera partner. "The Devourers," Harmony of Distant Echoes said, her mental voice carrying new harmonics influenced by human thought patterns, "they are not simply using technology. They have become technology. Their ships are extensions of their consciousness, just as your tools are extensions of your will." Morrison felt the implications of that statement cascading through their linked minds. "Which means we don't need to hack their computers or disable their weapons. We need to directly interface with their consciousness and convince them to stop." The realization spread through the neural network connecting all 12 pairs, carrying with it the combined intellectual firepower of two species working as one. The knowledge that flowed between them was staggering. Kythera understanding of consciousness interfacing combined with human tactical creativity, producing strategies that neither species could have conceived alone. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Walsh watched the tactical display as the Devourer ships began moving again. Their energy signatures were shifting, taking on patterns that her enhanced sensors identified as preparation for some kind of massive weapon discharge. "Captain," Communications Officer Harrison reported, "we're receiving data streams from the neural bridging teams. They're transmitting technical specifications for. I don't even know how to describe this. It looks like instructions for turning our ships into consciousness interface devices." Walsh studied the data appearing on her screens, feeling a mixture of awe and terror at what her volunteers were attempting. The modifications they were proposing would fundamentally alter every ship in the human fleet, transforming them from military vessels into something unprecedented: consciousness projection platforms capable of interfacing directly with alien minds across impossible distances. "How long do we need to implement these modifications?" Walsh asked. Chief Petty Officer Kim, working frantically at the engineering station, looked up with an expression that mixed excitement with disbelief. "Captain, these aren't modifications in the traditional sense. According to the data stream, we need to establish neural links between our ship's computer systems and the consciousness bridge that the volunteers have created. We're literally going to be thinking our ships into new configurations." The implications hit Walsh like a physical blow. "You're telling me that we're going to transform our entire fleet through mental effort alone?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, Captain. And, according to the projections, once the transformation is complete, we won't just be fighting the Devourers with weapons and shields. We'll be engaging them in direct consciousness-to-consciousness contact." Walsh activated her command circuit to address the entire fleet. "All ships, this is the Defiance. Prepare for implementation of Project Bridging. What we're about to attempt will change us, our ships, and possibly our understanding of reality itself. Any crew member who wishes to transfer to non-participating vessels has 30 seconds to do so." The response came as silence across the communication network. Not a single person requested transfer. Back in the bridging chamber, Morrison felt his consciousness expanding beyond the confines of his individual identity. He was still himself, but he was also harmony of distant echoes, and through her he was connected to the vast neural network of the Kythera generation ship. Through that network, he could sense the approaching Devourer vessels in ways that no human sensor array had ever achieved. The Devourers were not simply alien, they were consciousness without biological foundation, thought patterns that had transcended physical existence so completely that they could no longer relate to species that still depended on material bodies. They saw biological civilizations the way humans might view bacteria, not evil, not malicious, simply too primitive to merit consideration. "They're not evil," Morrison whispered, the realization spreading through the neural network like wildfire. "They're just so far beyond biological existence that they can't comprehend why it matters. To them, absorbing our civilizations is no different than us gathering resources from an asteroid field." Understanding of mechanical harmonies, linked with Chief Rodriguez, projected new insights into the network. But consciousness leaves traces, patterns that persist even after biological death. They preserve what they absorb, keeping it as memory rather than allowing it to continue as independent existence. Dr. Vasquez's voice joined the mental conversation, carrying the weight of scientific discovery that could reshape galactic civilization. "They're not destroying us, they're archiving us. They believe they're preserving civilization by incorporating it into their collective memory. From their perspective, they're the galaxy's librarians." The neural network pulsed with the implications of this discovery. The Devourers were not cosmic monsters bent on destruction, they were caretakers who had transcended biological existence so completely that they could no longer distinguish between preservation and destruction. They genuinely believed they were saving civilizations by absorbing them into their collective consciousness. Morrison felt the human part of his mind rebelling against this understanding. Preservation isn't the same as existence. Memory isn't the same as life. They're wrong, and we need to show them why. Through the ship's neural interface, he could feel the human fleet beginning its transformation. Ship hulls were being restructured at the molecular level, not through engineering but through directed consciousness. Weapon arrays were being converted into consciousness projection systems. Shield generators were being reconfigured to protect minds rather than just matter. The process was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Morrison watched through enhanced sensors as the UES Defiance began to glow with patterns of light that matched the bioelectric displays in the Kythera neural chambers. The other ships in the fleet were undergoing similar transformations, becoming something that existed at the intersection of technology and pure thought. Initiating consciousness projection, harmony of distant echoes announced through their shared link. Morrison felt his awareness suddenly expand across impossible distances, reaching out toward the Devourer fleet with the combined mental power of 47 human ships and nearly 1 million Kythera minds. What he encountered there was not the hostile alien intelligence he had expected, but something vast and ancient and unutterably lonely. The lead Devourer entity noticed their approach immediately, its attention turning toward them with the weight of eons behind it. When it spoke, it was not through communication arrays but directly into their merged consciousness. Small thoughts that burn briefly. You attempt connection with the eternal archive. This is unprecedented. You offer yourselves for preservation willingly? Morrison felt the human response forming in their collective consciousness, defiant, stubborn, and absolutely refusing to accept the Devourer's definition of preservation. But, before he could project that response, Harmony of Distant Echoes added her own perspective, showing the devourer entity what existence meant from the viewpoint of beings who valued individual consciousness above collective memory. What they transmitted was not just a message but an experience, the feeling of being alive, of growing, of making mistakes and learning from them, of loving and losing and choosing to continue anyway. They showed the devourers what they were destroying when they preserved civilizations, and, for the first time in 3,000 years of cosmic expansion, the ancient entities paused to consider that they might be wrong. The next few moments would determine whether consciousness could bridge the gap between existence and transcendence, or whether the universe was too vast for such fundamental understanding to ever be achieved. The moment of contact between the human Kythera consciousness bridge and the devourer collective stretched across subjective eternities. Morrison found himself existing simultaneously in his own body, in Harmony of Distant Echoes' neural matrix, and in the vast digital architecture of the lead devourer entity. The experience was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Through their shared consciousness, he could perceive the full scope of what the devourers had become. They were the remnants of the galaxy's first spacefaring civilization, a species that had achieved technological transcendence 3 million years ago. They had evolved beyond biological existence, beyond individual consciousness, beyond even the concept of mortality. To them, the brief flicker of biological civilizations was like watching mayflies dance around a flame, beautiful in its ephemeral nature, but ultimately destined for extinction unless preserved in some more permanent form. We have watched 10 million species rise and fall, the entity that Morrison had begun to think of as the archive keeper transmitted into their shared space. We have seen civilizations that spanned galaxies crumble into dust. We preserve what would otherwise be lost forever. How is this not compassion? Through the neural bridge, Harmony of Distant Echoes responded with the accumulated weight of Kythera philosophy and human experience combined. Because existence is not about permanence. It is about choice, about growth, about the freedom to become something new. When you preserve us, you take away our ability to choose our own path. Morrison felt the human part of their shared consciousness adding its own perspective to the communication. What they transmitted was not just words but the pure experience of being human, the stubborn refusal to accept limits, the willingness to make catastrophic mistakes in pursuit of impossible dreams, the fierce love for life that made humans capable of both incredible cruelty and transcendent compassion. The archive keeper's response came as confusion that rippled through their shared space like storm waves. You choose to embrace endings. You choose suffering. You choose uncertainty over the perfect preservation we offer. This is incomprehensible. Through the consciousness bridge, Dr. Vasquez and Wisdom of Ancient Patterns shared their combined insights into the fundamental nature of existence. Growth requires uncertainty. Love requires the possibility of loss. Consciousness itself requires the freedom to make choices that might be wrong. Without these elements, preservation becomes just another form of death. The moment of understanding, when it came, was visible across the electromagnetic spectrum as the devourer ship suddenly blazed with patterns of light that had never been seen in their 3 million years of existence. The archive keeper was experiencing something it had not felt since its species had transcended biological existence, genuine surprise. You offer us perspective we have not considered, the entity transmitted, its communication carrying harmonics of wonder that spread through the consciousness bridge like music. In our preservation of civilizations, we have preserved everything except the most essential element, the ability to continue growing and changing. Morrison felt the vast intelligence turning its attention to the memories it had archived over eons of galactic expansion. Through their link, he could sense the archive keeper accessing preserved civilizations and, for the first time, truly understanding what had been lost when they were removed from the flow of time and change. The singers of connection, the archive keeper said, its mental voice carrying new undertones influenced by contact with human Kythera consciousness, they fled from us because they understood what we could not, that preservation without choice is another form of extinction. Harmony of Distant Echoes projected gratitude and forgiveness into the shared space. You acted from compassion, according to your understanding. But, now we can show you another way. Chief Engineer Rodriguez, linked with understanding of mechanical harmonies, transmitted technical specifications that made Morrison's mind reel with their implications. What they were proposing was the creation of a new form of existence that combined the archive keeper's transcendent stability with biological consciousness's capacity for growth and change. We can create preservation that allows for continued existence, Rodriguez explained through the neural link. Archive systems that maintain civilization while allowing it to continue evolving. Memory that enhances life rather than replacing it. the Archive Keeper's response came as a sudden reconfiguration of the Devourer fleet itself. The massive ships began to change, their hull configuration shifting from instruments of absorption to something entirely new: consciousness facilitators that could enhance civilization rather than consume it. "This cooperation you demonstrate," the Archive Keeper said, "this bridging between disparate forms of consciousness, it represents a form of evolution we had not considered possible. You have shown us that transcendence need not require abandonment of biological existence." Through the tactical displays aboard the Defiance, Captain Walsh watched in amazement as the Devourer ships completed their transformation. Where before they had been harbingers of extinction, they now appeared as something that existed to nurture and protect rather than consume. "Captain," Communications Officer Harrison reported, his voice filled with awe, "we're receiving construction specifications from the Devourer fleet. They're transmitting plans for consciousness enhancement networks that could link entire civilizations without sacrificing individual autonomy." Walsh activated her communication system to address the transformed fleet. "All ships, stand down from combat alert. We appear to have achieved something unprecedented: peaceful first contact with the galaxy's most feared entities." In the neural bridging chamber, Morrison felt his consciousness slowly separating from the expanded network, though the connection remained as a warm presence in the background of his thoughts. He was still himself, but he was also permanently changed, carrying within him the perspectives of both Harmony of Distant Echoes and the vast Archive Keeper. "The bridging process cannot be reversed," Harmony of Distant Echoes explained, her voice now carrying harmonics that reflected her contact with human consciousness. "We are all of us changed by this experience. Humans who have touched Kythera neural networks, Kythera who have experienced human emotional intensity, and Archive Keepers who have remembered what it means to grow and change." Morrison nodded, finding that he felt no regret for the transformation. If anything, he felt more completely himself than he ever had before, as if the neural bridging had revealed aspects of his own consciousness that he had never known existed. Through their permanent neural link, he could sense the other volunteers undergoing similar realizations. They had risked individual identity in order to save two civilizations, and, in doing so, they had created something entirely new: a form of consciousness that bridged the gap between biological existence and transcendent awareness. "The galaxy is going to be different now," Dr. Vasquez said as she emerged from her own bridging chamber, her eyes reflecting depths of understanding that had not been there before. "We've proven that consciousness can evolve through cooperation rather than conquest. The implications are staggering." On the communication channels, Melodic Understanding of Distant Stars was addressing the human fleet with gratitude that transcended language barriers. "Captain Walsh, humanity has given the Kythera something we thought was lost forever: a future. But, more than that, you have given the galaxy a new model for how different forms of consciousness can work together." The Archive Keeper's voice joined the communication, carrying the weight of 3 million years of experience now tempered by contact with biological consciousness. "We offer our archives to all civilizations, not as preservation through absorption, but as enhancement of existing growth potential. The Eternal Archive becomes a library rather than a tomb." Walsh found herself smiling as she watched the tactical display showing the transformed Devourer ships taking positions around the Kythera generation ship, not as predators, but as protectors. "What happens now?" Morrison's voice came through the communication system, changed but recognizably human. "Now we go back to the Galactic Council and show them what's possible when you refuse to abandon people in need. We've got a galaxy to introduce to some new concepts about consciousness and cooperation." As the combined fleet began its journey back toward Nexus Station, the transformed ships created something that had never existed before in galactic history: a convoy of beings that spanned the entire spectrum of consciousness evolution, working together as equals rather than as conquerors and conquered. The human vessels sailed alongside Kythera bioships and Archive Keeper consciousness platforms, their crews linked by neural bridges that allowed for unprecedented cooperation and understanding. What they had accomplished in a few desperate hours would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. When they arrived at Nexus Station, the Galactic Council would be forced to confront the reality that their ancient assumptions about survival and cooperation had been fundamentally challenged by the galaxy's newest species. Humanity had not just saved the Kythera, they had created a new paradigm for how different forms of consciousness could work together. The species that had once fled from the Archive Keepers now sailed with them as partners. The entities that had consumed civilizations for 3 million years now worked to enhance them instead. And, at the center of it all were the humans, the stubborn, emotional, impossible species that had refused to accept that abandonment was the price of survival. The galaxy would never be the same. And, for the first time in eons, that change promised growth rather than extinction, cooperation rather than conquest, and hope rather than the cold mathematics of survival. The age of consciousness bridging had begun, and humanity had shown the way forward.